So welcome to another board game review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we're doing something that's slightly different from what you might typically see on the channel. Today we're taking a look at the new Dune, War for Arrakis from, they call themselves...
Come on.
CMON. Cool Mini or Not used to be.
Not, yeah.
So
there was a day where they literally made miniatures, right?
there was, no.
No?
There was a day, so Cool Mini or Not, it used to be a website that was like rating. So you would post your pictures of your minis, and people would go through and rate
Is
it
it
1 to
cool
10.
or not? Yeah.
Yeah, like. Yeah,
Interesting.
it was literally like that. And then,
Okay.
then I think they may have started doing sculpts, and then they branched out into board games very quickly.
But their hallmark is that most of their games have miniatures.
Yes. And so this is a 2-player. Well, it can do up to 4, but we played it 2 players.
With a solo mode. It does have a solo mode.
A full solo mode. 2-player game. Dudes on a map. A little bit of Ameritrashy. War for Arrakis. This is designed by the team that brought you War of the Ring, hence War for Arrakis, and it uses that similar, very same system.
Yeah.
Where it's roll your action dice,
Assign
put them on here. You do those. There's cards that you're going to draw from.
Heroes, there's
Leaders,
yeah.
different types of units, and it's fulfilling different objectives. So this is quite an asymmetric game, just like War of the Ring is. The Harkonnen side, they're trying to gain supremacy, and they're going to do that by early game, getting lots of spice and selling it, but primarily from going out and destroying Fremen sieges. The Atreides/Fremen side of things, very different. You have a different track, and you're trying to reach certain prescience levels within 3 different categories. You have secret objectives that you draw one of, and that will tell you need 3 green, 6 yellow, and 10 red, for example. And you have to fulfill prescience card objectives or take over the ecological laboratories.
That will give you a token.
Yes, to be able to get points within those colors. So very different with how they score, and very different with how they play as well. They do have they have the same units in that their units function the same way, but how you gain those, how many you can gain, is very different. Yeah. And then the movements for both factions is very different, with the Harkonnens having air transports that they can use, and the Atreides side having what do they call it? Sand riding, that's what it's called. There's also a ton of stuff with these desert powers where you're going to place and move these sandworms and all sorts of different things, and that is to help balance with the very different kind of initial startup force disposition, where the Harkonnens have a ton of guys here, and they have to go out with a big force. And as you might imagine, the kind of insurgent side, the Atreides have to defend their little outposts and then do some raiding here and go and destroy some harvesters. Plays very differently from both sides.
Yep. Well, and I almost feel like, because I played the Harkonnens, I felt like the Harkonnen is more of a timer. And I don't mean that literally, but I think my objectives are easier to accomplish. They have spread them out a little bit, so it's almost like, it's going to take a couple of turns to get these and a couple of turns to get these, whereas yours is dependent on that deck.
And those have different objectives, and they can change, and so you might be doing one thing, and you complete some of those, and then the new ones come out, and it's like, do something totally different on the other side of the board, and you're like, ah.
But I feel like really the onus is on you as the Fremen to win the game. I think Harkonnen, you're winning the game too. I don't know if I'm explaining myself that well.
I think they're a bit more of a straightforward kind of force, where they're moving along, progressing, progressing, and if you don't do anything, they will progress continually.
And what you can do is really reinforce those sieges, put your sandworms out as blockers, use your sand striding or whatever that was called to create barriers and barricades. That's very important, and I like that asymmetry in the game. That's one of my favorite parts about War of the Ring as well. It's a completely different way to play the game, and each of us are playing different games.
Well, and it's, can I disrupt the flow of spice enough?
Yeah.
Where not enough flows, and the rest of the Imperium gets annoyed and starts putting in these bans.
The spice must flow.
Great little sideboard.
Yeah, it's very cool.
And the less spice there is, that there's cards that come out that hurt you, but also they give you more stuff to
try to get you back
claw your
into
way
it.
back into it. That's a really neat little aspect.
And
of
really,
it.
to be honest, as you mentioned, it's a dice rolling, kind of an action selection using those style of dice. The Harkonnens have 8. You had 4 with 4 wild actions that were
the desert
stuff. Yeah. So we basically have the same amount, but not quite.
Yeah, just different.
But as you don't do well in spice production, for the Harkonnens, they're going to lose a die each time this goes down. And
it's based on the lowest one.
Yeah,
so.
and you can lose up to 4 dice. And if you're losing 4 dice, you're done. Because your real advantage is to get your powerful units, get them out, attack. And if you can't do that, you're going to struggle. And I like that, right? I like the counter punch, counter punch type thing where we're playing different games, trying to. And if you can ever just disrupt spice for even one turn, it makes a huge difference.
Yes.
Losing 1 or 2 dice makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the different facets of the game where you're like, okay, I'm trying to do these prescience objectives, but also I need to destroy some harvesters to disrupt you.
Yep.
But then also I need to protect my sieges from your forces because you're trying to do that. So there's never just like, I gotta go do this. There's always, even as the Harkonnen, it's like, cool, I want to go get my objectives, but I can see what you're trying to do. I have to prevent that because you're going to score points. And then I have to do my best to protect my harvesters with the carryalls or with maybe a couple of protective legions if you want to waste your time doing that.
Yeah, that's really hard to accomplish.
I think that's easier if you leave them in the middle, but
then they don't give as much spice.
No.
And that was a very cool part of the game.
Yeah.
Once I saw that, I'm like, I can't put I might be able to put 1 in the middle.
Yeah, if you've got a bunch of them from your house.
But you've got to go out at the edges of the map, and putting yourself out at the edges of the map means you're closer to the sandworms, you're closer to the sieges, and further away from any aid of any kind, with the exception of the carryalls. And those are direly important. I think you only have 3 of those. And you're not going to get...
You're mostly going to have 1.
You're going to start typically with 1, but then you can buy them with the house action. And after we played the first game, I'm like, yeah, those are really important. Because ultimately they save them from the worms, and that's key.
But they also consume the airspace, so you can't have ornithopters there, so it limits your military capabilities.
Movement, yep.
So there's great decisions at every point that I really liked. We also played with the Spacing Guild expansion as well.
Which was this little sideboard.
Yeah, you kind of see some of it here. If you have it, there's no reason to play without it, basically.
No, it's not overly complex. It doesn't really change the game. It just adds some little elements that I thought were very, very cool.
Yeah, like when the Atreides use a legion to destroy a harvester, they take an Imperium action. When you spend a certain number of spice to maintain or to improve you get Imperium actions. And so those are things where you're doing those anyway, and it just moves these little extra things along, and once you get them, it just drops some troops or some extra of these space frigates onto the board that gives you more stuff to play with.
Yeah.
Like you said, no extra complications. It really seamlessly integrates, and I would never play it without those.
Yeah. So that was a nice add-on. I know the other one you had, the Smugglers.
Yeah, the Smugglers is a bit more involved. It's like a neutral faction that you can both kind of manipulate and do things with. But I hadn't read the rules, so we didn't play with it.
Sure.
So it looks cool, but
we'll add that one in next time. I really liked the game because it was a 3-hour game, right?
It did not feel like a 3-hour
No,
game.
it didn't.
We got done with it, and I was like, oh, man, the time went. It
Yeah,
was
it was
so
very quick.
engrossing and pacey, and we were always doing stuff, and I enjoyed every second of it.
And I'm trying to think, how many rounds was that? About 5 or 6? Is that correct, you think?
It may have been 4 or 5.
Okay. And I just got lucky. I happened to have all of the larger pointed sieges.
Yeah, closer to and within easier
It just
striking
made
range.
it.
But it's first game as well. So we talked about this a long time after we played this.
Oh, yeah.
There is a lot of things to be like, oh, I should have done this, or maybe I would have done this. As you figure that out, multiple plays of this are going to reward.
But I think it's important, though, you can't do everything. You're going to have to pick 1 or 2 things and kind of focus on it. But you do, like you said, you have to keep your eyes open and looking at where the other player is going and what they're doing. You can't just ignore them. It's very important.
And I really like the map. There's often areas of the map where you're like, oh, this is a really interesting place where they've got borders between regions.
Yeah.
Always like that in games. But I think about when I had that big old army in the mountains and you had a big old army next to it.
Yep.
And who was going to move first and what were we trying to do with it?
Yep.
Because you ended up moving guys to go and protect a different area.
Yep.
And I was moving on to the
flats.
Those flats to fulfill an objective.
To get some points, yeah.
But in doing that, we're also both within striking range of a siege, or I can move and do something else, or run away. And so everything is like, you make one move, and it's like, oh, is he trying to do this? Or is he trying to do this? Or is he trying to do this? And trying to kind of figure that out and move appropriately.
It was interesting, because you had a pretty good sized force there. You had at least 2 deployment tokens, which that was one of the cool parts about the game. I don't really ever know the true makeup of your forces. Those deployment tokens have 2 typically, but some of them have...
Mine all have 2. I think the Harkonnen ones have 3.
Some of mine had 3, but I didn't get to use them in the way you... So you kept your forces hidden, and I was sitting there going, okay, he has at least 5 guys. That means 5 dice. And then, because you get 1 die per unit, not for a leader, but for the military units. Then you can discard a card to get an extra dice. So rolling 6 dice is the most you're going to ever have. And you're trying to match, you're trying to get the swords or the daggers, right? Which are hits. Shields will block those hits. And then the special icons will activate leader abilities, which are typically 2 swords or a sword and a shield. So you get a little bit of both. But I love that I couldn't tell what you had. And like you said, when you move down into those flats, I'm like, okay, what's he doing? And I looked over here and I'm like, okay, he's trying to get 2 different armies in that area because that's one of his objectives.
Yeah.
Because then you move this other one and I'm like, he's not going to attack me. So then I decided, okay, I'm going to take advantage of my transport, fly over you, and attack the final siege, and ultimately got lucky, and it was 2 points, and that's what I needed. But the battle mechanic, I think, is very well done.
Yeah,
it's fun.
Without being complex.
Yep, it's fun, it's light, it's an Ameritrash bunch of dice, 5 to 6 dice, and you're just rolling and matching symbols, and it's very cool.
And it reminds me of the way that I felt about Triumph, where totally different game.
Yeah, Triumph from Phalanx.
The combat system wasn't burdensome.
No.
Like this game, it plays well, it's quick, you're doing stuff, you're thinking.
Yep.
No one wants to then sit down and have a 15-minute battle process.
No.
And this is not that, count you guys, roll that many dice, compare the results. So it's very complementary to the rest of the game.
Well, and I also think none of its mechanisms really are overburdensome.
No, I would agree with that.
You roll some dice, you put your actions here. You take your actions.
You do one and you resolve it. You do one, you resolve it.
You can play a card by using a dice. And it's really fairly simple.
Yeah.
And ultimately what you're trying to do is get into areas and take over areas, and it's fairly straightforward. Yet there's enough meat here that makes it unique. I think there's going to be a lot of replayability.
A ton, yes.
My favorite part in playing against you as the Fremen was the desert phase at the very end of the game.
The desert hazards phase.
The desert hazards phase, where you put a token randomly drawn from
Yeah.
about 15
Yeah.
of those, and you place those in every single desert space where I had a unit, either a vehicle, a harvester, or armies, and you put those out, and then we reveal them, and that's what happens. Some of them were blanks, right? They were just dunes.
Yeah.
Some were burrower worms or
yes.
quaking or whatever, and that meant
They're
a sandworm's going to come out.
if they're in the deep desert.
The deep desert, and then some of them were sandworms, and that's what happened to you. So there was a little bit of the unknown. There was a little bit of angst and anxiety about that. I remember my first turn. I'm like, I've only got 3 of these harvesters out. How am I going to get it? And I'm like, oh, I only lost one of them, so I got 4. Good. Get more out, Grant. And that's what I did. I think here at the game of the end state, I had like 5 on the board.
Yeah.
And that's very important. But I really like that unknown in those. And I thought the cards were really well done. They're not overpowered. They're
but they're cool.
Yep.
It's like, hey, some of them are very niche where it's like, do this one thing. And you're like, yeah, okay, maybe not. But when you need it, that'll be awesome.
It works well.
But then some of them it's like, hey, change some of your troops into
elite.
different types of troops.
Yep.
Is that better? Is that what you need? Do you need the hexagonally based ones?
Yep.
Or do you want the square ones, which maybe aren't as strong, but
Can be reduced.
they've got extra hits available to it? Yeah, there's
It
so
was
much
well done.
to consider within these small decision spaces that everything that you do feels meaningful and is,
Yeah.
nothing is just like, do this thing.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
everything's like, ooh, I do it here or here. Or
Yeah. Very well done. I also really enjoyed the concept of movement. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but in a lot of games, you move and fight. Not here, right? You're having to move, and I think that's a condition of the terrain and the difficulty and the distance. But you move, and then a later action, you typically can fight. Now, there's some cards that kind of break that rule. There's even a leader that breaks that rule. But that's a part of the game that you've got to think about. How many actions do I have? How many can I afford? What do I really need to do? And you're only going to be able to attack 1 or 2 times per game.
Yeah.
So planning those out, I like that. I'm a planner. I like to plan, and I thought that was well done.
And
too.
I felt that there's a lot of games that are like this with this kind of, this one isn't Dudes on a Map, but with these, area move games where things can be very chaotic outside of your turn. And this one, I did not feel that was the case, where like you could make a good plan.
Yeah.
You can follow through with a good plan.
Yeah.
And I find that rewarding in games as well. Some games, it's like, yeah, check your plans at the door. The game's kind of going to happen to you. And that's fine. There's space for that. But this one, it was like,
well, I
can put my guys here. So the
Yeah.
next time I can use this ornithopter to launch them and do an attack. And
Yeah.
And, generally speaking, that isn't going to be massively scuppered unless like they run away. Or, like there's not a ton of like take that stuff.
Right.
Some of the cards do, but it's not unconscionable.
And that was something we had a nice little discussion about during the game. I think almost every Dune game we've ever played, one of the hallmarks of those games is the douchey card play.
A massive amount of treachery, yes.
I play this card and I take away your weapon. I'm thinking of Donna Fremen.
Yes.
Or
Arrakis,
the original Dune
yeah.
that we got the reboot from Gale Force 9.
Yes.
A lot of those were like, oh, I poison your guy, so even if you win this battle, that dude's dying. Those things are so, I enjoy them, and to me, they're very Dune. That was probably the only thing I wanted to see a little bit in here, but I actually, after playing it and finishing the whole game, I'm not sure it's really necessary. I think what's here is really solid and good, and there's a lot of great things about it.
I wouldn't be surprised if they added like an intrigue expansion.
Yeah.
But
you know what I'm saying, though, right?
I know, absolutely. But I also...
You lose some of your guys, or this happens, or that leader goes home. There's some of that, like I killed one of your leaders.
Yeah,
what was
but that was like a whole action. And
it was. It took my whole action, yeah.
But then the other part of me is like, it's War for Arrakis. It's really just like a fighting game.
Yeah.
And so having all the intrigue stuff is...
Sure.
In a big Dune game, yeah, because it's about all that other stuff.
Right.
In Dune Imperium, same thing. It's like all about all that other stuff. This one is like, here's my guys on the ground, let's shoot each other.
Let's fight.
So I think they tried to keep it streamlined, and they did a good job at that, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. So it's funny because, once again, uses the War of the Ring engine.
Yeah.
and we kind of kept making the comment, ooh, I want to play War of the Ring again.
Yes.
But you made the comment, and I think I actually agree with you. This is a better version of that system.
I think this might be a better game.
Yeah, yeah.
But I love
and don't
Lord
crucify
of the
us,
Rings,
right?
And the theme
Yep.
of Lord of the Rings
It's
is
amazing.
incredible.
And that game has such amazing things in it.
It's also long.
It's very long.
This is, I think, much shorter.
Agreed. Anyway, I still want to go back and play
Yes.
War of the Ring. I have it.
But I
We've
also want
played
to
it.
play this again, like, right now.
Oh, I agree. I would set this up and go at it again, and I think the game would be very, very
Very different.
different. And I really want to play the Fremen because I was watching what you were doing, and I was like, okay, how is that best going to be done? And I think by the end, the sandworms, you used them very well near the end. And I'm like, dang, he's got it. And I think if you'd had those at the beginning,
Yeah, figuring out
maybe that would've-
how to do it all.
Yep.
This is, again, it's a rewarding game for multiple plays.
Yeah.
And you know, if you play with the same person over and over again, you know, like, you're both learning at the same rate.
Yeah.
You're both learning how to play each other.
Yep.
And two-player games that can do that and still be satisfying are always, that's
pretty
a
good.
huge win, a big
Yeah.
tick in that column for me as well.
the other thing, the minis are beautiful.
Oh, I mean, we didn't even, the production's incredible.
Well, and look at the box. I mean, the box is incredible.
Come on, man. Look at this.
Well, and this is a special worm, right? That's only used as a variant rule, right?
Yeah, the Old Man of the Desert, it's a variant rule. It removes the Bene Gesserit tokens, and basically you kind of suck up all the stuff like that's desert-based on the board, and this bad boy comes out, and he only travels around the outer sectors of the board, and he basically just like dominates those.
Yeah.
Which makes it very hard
To gain spice.
for the Harkonnen to get the deep desert spice, because you just move them over there, and then he can
Yeah.
just attack everyone pretty easily.
Yeah.
So I definitely want to try that.
Sure.
Because that's very different.
How did they do that? I think this is interesting how there's a hole in
Well,
there. Just
this one looks like this is a piece that got put into this. It's a different
Oh, maybe.
color.
So it's hollow underneath there. Yeah, very nice minis, though.
yeah,
It's
because
beautiful.
it doesn't weigh very much.
No, it doesn't. I mean, I was over here collecting spice.
Yeah, right. And the
So
and the
cool.
highliners are just like
So nice.
Boop, boop, boop. Yeah, it's the sculpts are great.
Yeah.
A little bit hard to tell some of the different pieces apart.
Sure.
the two Jessica minis
We're very
like,
similar.
okay.
I did not have that problem with my leaders. I felt like my leaders were so unique that they didn't look anything alike.
But yes, and they're also, I think the pieces generally are like a little bit smaller and finer than something like Blood Rage and Rising Sun, where they're a bit bulkier,
Yeah.
but they're not nearly so fine as something like Cyclades.
Sure.
That's a different company, but like they're really nice.
These are really nice.
Yeah. And
Well, and like you said, the sculpts. The number of sculpts is crazy. You've got your generic infantry guys. I had 3 different sculpts for those.
Yeah.
I assume you had 3 as well. You had the pistol guys. You
was
had
it 2 for the generic ones? I don't know. But
Okay.
there's multiple sculpts for each type of unit.
Yeah.
Which is, they didn't need to do that, but they
No.
did, and it was awesome.
And then my elite, the Sadakars, there were 2 different sculpts and very nice.
Yeah.
2 different sculpts for the elite guys as well, the normal elites. But yeah, they didn't need to do that, but I thought that was a really nice touch and
Yeah.
really made the game that much better.
And I think that more than some of the other games that they've done, I think it's really clever to do it in this one, because the only thing you're really concerned about is the shape of the base.
Sure.
So you can have as many sculpts as you want without being like, what was this one?
Yeah, you just
What
think,
was
oh,
that
that's a
one?"
hexagon. This is the Sadakars.
Because
and
I think about something like Blood Rage, and it's like, is this a priest, or is this
Yeah.
a leader? Is this
You're
a
right.
regular guy? Because they've got multiple sculpts, and you're like, which one is this?
this
But-
worm looks like it's two parts.
Yeah, I'm sure.
glued together.
I'm sure that is. Yeah, that's the same on this one too.
Yeah. Anyway, we're
Yeah.
kind of blithering on about the minis, which is such a
But
great
it's
part
it's
of
that
these
kind of
games.
game, right?
Yeah,
It's great fun to play with, but the actual play experience for me was
Yeah.
really, really good.
And the reality is, when you play with 4, we looked at the rule differences. There's
Yes.
another. You basically split your player board into 2,
Yeah, and you have separate
2 different
of
decks,
cards.
which I was able to draw from both of those. But in that other game, you're only able to draw from
You're
one.
one, yeah.
But all you do is you kind of share the dice, and it looks like it will work pretty well. I'm a little concerned for the Fremen because they're only going to have like
You have 2 dice
one or
and
two.
two desert
Yeah,
actions.
it's just not a lot.
And I think the limit on the desert actions is what's tough.
Yeah.
So I'd
It'll
like
be
to try
interesting.
it.
I would
just
love to try it,
because
too.
I think this is also a game that I think it's expensive, and I
Sure.
think there's a lot of people who didn't get it, but who would want to play it.
Yeah.
And so we
Well,
have
this-
it, so we can introduce it to a couple other people.
We got
as
to
well.
take this to a convention. No
I
doubt.
think so too. Yeah. Because it does not take that long to play.
No, 2 to 3 hours. I think you're going to knock through this.
Yeah.
And it's fun. We had a blast.
Yeah,
so.
really enjoyed it. So Dune, War for Arrakis.
And look at that freaking box.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
They even did like the foil gold.
it's incredible.
It's great. But
Incredible.
yeah, check this out if this is something that you're interested in. This was right up my alley. Ticked all the boxes, and
Yep.
the gameplay the rules are really easy. It was very
Easy to pick
get
up.
into and pick up.
Well, and I think it was easier for us to pick it up because we've played War of the Ring.
This is an easier rulebook than War of the Ring.
I would
like
agree.
it's just more modern. It's better
Yeah.
laid out. It's
Agreed.
bigger typeface.
Agreed.
But yeah, I had a blast. Check it out if you're interested, but appreciate you very much for tuning in. I've been Alexander from PlayerSaid.com.
And I'm Grant.